Hello, Jeff Green here, and welcome to this week's Arizona Real Estate Market Update. We're going to talk about these topics today. If you've ever heard of MV Realty, there's a big danger here. As soon as you hear from them, hang up the phone or run in the opposite direction. We're going to talk about mortgage rate update and expectations for rate changes in the future. We'll take a quick look at the pre-foreclosure numbers. We'll look at contract ratios and what always happens in January. At the beginning of the year through, let's say, March or April or May. If you're looking for a home, you want to be aware of what's going to happen here. We'll take a look at the Phoenix Metro heat map, which shows where in the Phoenix area or Phoenix metropolitan area, areas are cooling down or still hot. And we'll take a look at the supply and demand numbers, which still show a balanced market in the general area. So let's look at the first chart. Let's talk about MV Realty. This is a scary deal, everybody. If you don't know about these people, you need to know about them. What their strategy is they will call people who have a mortgage and they don't even need to pay off your mortgage to get this thing into place. So they'll offer somebody or a homeowner that owns a house anywhere from, I've heard, $1,500 to $2,500, depending on the value of the house and, of course, what they can get away with. And here's what happens. Buried in the fine print is a covenant that runs with the land. That's why you don't have to pay this thing off. If your current mortgage company never finds out about this, they won't call the loans due. But so the way this works is that the covenant or some buried in the paperwork is a statement that says you will always use MV Realty when you sell your properties. And they know that everybody will sell their property sooner or later. More frequently within 30 or 40 years than the next couple of years. But what happens is that they say that you will always use MV Realty to sell with, and it runs with the land. You can't remove this unless you get MV Realty to give, to sign off on it. And guess what they want to sign off on it? They want their commission, which is typically 3%, and I've heard more than 3% on this agreement. So that sort of freezes you into a real trap. If you want to refinance, you have to get rid of this covenant. If you want to sell your property, you have to get rid of this covenant. If you want to use somebody else, or you have to use them. And it's a real problem because guess what? If you own a $500,000 house, it's going to cost you 3% of that, or $15,000 to get rid of this. So this is a big problem. There's already several states in investigation. As of I guess the 7th of December, there are 769 agreements that have been filed in Maricopa County alone. So there's been 18 pending lawsuits against these people. So be aware of this name, MV Realty. If you hear about them or anybody who might be investigating getting some of this money, advise them that's probably not the best thing to do. If you have any more questions, just give me a shout and I'll try and fill you in. Okay, let's take a look at mortgage rates. And we can see that mortgage rates have taken a rather, let's say, roller coaster ride since September of last year. So September, they were right around 6%. They went up to over 7%, and they're now down to 6.13%. So you can still get, if you're using a 2-for-1 buy down using seller concessions, which is becoming very popular in the Phoenix, Arizona market, you can get a mortgage at 4%, low 4s, and on a 3-to-1 buy down, maybe 3% or below 4%. So be aware of this. Make sure that you're keeping an eye on this number and using seller concessions wherever possible. And let's talk about why mortgage rates have not been really, they're not really responsive to the Federal Reserve interest changes. And here's why. Because I get a lot of calls that say, hey, Federal Reserve just put up their interest rate. How come mortgage rates didn't go up or have fallen down? What happens is that the mortgage interest rate is very dependent on the market for buying and selling mortgages. Almost all mortgages are sold in a secondary market. And because there's a feeling that next year the interest rates are more likely to fall than go up, the market has been quite active for buying mortgages on the secondary market, which is pushing those mortgage rates down. So mortgage rates don't really respond to the Fed. They respond to the market, the secondary market for mortgages, and also the inflation rate, which has sort of flattened out over the last couple of months. As you can see here, mortgage rates have come down. So be aware of that. It's not always dependent on the Fed. It's more dependent on the secondary market and inflation rates. Let's take a look at the negative. Well, let's take a look at the yield curve. So this is the 10-year bond minus usually a 6-month bond. And what happens is that when this turns negative, which means the longer term interest rates are cheaper than short-term interest rates. And that's usually a precursor for a recession. So you can see that these bars here are recessions. You can see that preceding that up to about 6 months or a year, there was a negative yield curve. And we have a very distinct negative yield curve here. We're down to about minus 0.75. So that's a strong indication of a recession next year. So I hope a recession, if it does come about, doesn't spoil anybody's work life or anything like that. But what can you expect when interest rates during recessions? They usually come down. So let's take a look at how that happens. Now, this is the same sort of chart with the recessions here in the gray colors. And you can see that during every recession, interest rates fell. Now, you could say in some of these, it was just a continuation of a trend. And you could certainly make that argument. But you can also see that they did come down in every recession. If there was a recession in this period here, I think you can see these interest rates falling. However, don't wait until interest rates actually fall if you are thinking about getting a good price on a house. Once interest rates fall, prices are going to go up overnight. So make sure you get on the train and sort of get prepared to buy a home if that's what you want to do. Let's take a look at, if I can get my mouse to work properly, let's take a look at the Consumer Price Index. Now, this is, I've shown this chart a couple of times. This is the last 6-month inflation rate here. You can see the numbers, the CPI numbers, and the year-over-year inflation. Now, what happens is you take current month's number and compare it to 12 months ago. So this current month, 7.1%, is being compared to this number down here, or actually I should say the CPI is being compared to this number down here, which comes up to this percent inflation rate. So you can see that as we go through time here, in another 6 months, if these prices stay about the same, then whatever number is out here will be compared to this number, 296.3. So that might, if the numbers are the same, it's probably going to be a less than 2% inflation rate. So if you look at this strategy, then based on this measure, a 2% would be reached in May 2023 because you go out 6 months from this most recent high bar here. If that happens, you could potentially anticipate a decrease in interest rates, and especially if there's a recession, you could expect a fairly significant decrease in interest rates. But again, like I say, don't wait for this stuff to happen. Get on board now so you can figure out what the market is, what sort of homes you would like, and you can be ready before those prices start taking off again. Let's take a look at the pre-foreclosures. No weekly market update is valid without looking at the foreclosures. And you can see we're down here in this incredibly low foreclosures. So this is an advanced look at selling pressure? And I don't see any selling pressure here coming at all. But we look at this every week. If you have any questions about this, don't hesitate to give me a shout. Let's take a look at the contract rate for the Phoenix metropolitan area. Okay, so this orange line is 2022, and this blue line is 2021. Now, what I want to point out here is that in the beginning of the year, you could just look at the historical, these faded lines here. You certainly get an improvement in the contract rate, and that is houses that have been on the market, that have sold, have a valid contract, and are proceeding to closing. So between here and week 16, you have this giant sort of area here where you have a lot more activity. And that happens in just about every market, whether it's a seller's market in the beginning of the year or a buyer's market in the beginning of the year. You just get more activity, and then it sort of tapers off to where we are in December, right? So you can see the December numbers here, and you can see how the environment has sort of changed these numbers. This significant drawdown, which was a drawdown that was faster than historically, was from the rate hikes. So that's not an unexpected decrease. This last year was from iBuyers and institutions. They sort of disrupted the flow in 2021, but that didn't change the end of the year. and it didn't change the beginning of the year. So be aware. January is when the hot season starts. If you want to get in a home, don't wait too long, or you're going to be paying too much money for a house as compared to the beginning part of the year. Let's take a look at the contract ratio over the year in time. This is just another look at the same data that we looked on the prior chart. So if you look in the December, January, February, March contract rates, you can just see the market heating up here and then falling off. Heating up here and then falling off. You can go back to the beginning part of every year. Doesn't matter what year. It always works that way, especially in the Phoenix area. So if you want to look for a house, my advice is don't wait till January, February to start looking. I don't want anybody to be frozen out again, because that's kind of bonkers. Let's look at the contract ratio as sort of a heat map across the area. So the earth tones on this chart are the hot and hotter areas. The cooler colors are, of course, where it's a little bit cooler. And green is where it's a balanced or warm market. And you can see where the hot area is here. It's on the northwest of the valley and sort of in the Scottsdale area here. Everything else is just about balanced to a little bit cooler. So if you're interested in a city or a zip code or a price range, I can tell you exactly what's going on in any one of these areas. Just give me a shot. Now, what's interesting, I talked about this a couple of videos ago. Right where my dot is, right there, is where Taiwan Semiconductor just announced they were going to expand their investment in Arizona to $40 billion. Okay. Now, this is the closest local area that have a lot of neighborhoods. Right. This is pretty open area still up in here. Here's Lake Pleasant, and if you're familiar with that area, there's a lot of open roads and a lot of open area. But I can anticipate with $40 billion going in there. That's likely the reason why this area is so hot. And as this factory gets built out and they start hiring thousands of workers, I would expect this whole area to be a little bit more of a seller's market. Prices going up fairly significantly. So that's a sort of contract ratio heat map. Call me if you want me to slice and dice this a little bit better or a little bit finer for you. Let's take a look at the Cromford Market Index. This is a chart of sort of major towns within the area and their categorization as far as seller markets or strongest buyer markets. So you can see that, like the chart before I showed it, these outlining areas have cooled the most. The inside areas, Fountain Hills, Cave Creek, Scottsdale are still strong, balanced, and Chandler, Phoenix, Glendale are balanced. Tempe and Gilbert sort of holding their own. Mesa Avenue, Peoria, and Surprise are stronger buyer market. So we can monitor this wherever you're interested in purchasing a property. Let's look at the summary for the Cromford supply and demand across the Phoenix metropolitan area, which includes all the armless submittals for single family or residential homes. Let's look at the market index overall. This market index is a combination of the supply versus the demand. So last week, if I remember correctly, this number was 88.5. You can tell down here, because I did another video of this last week that brought this out in a little more detail. We've come up significantly for, 3 or 4 months now. And this is a combination of the supply coming down and demand flattening out. So you take all these things in consideration, you get the fact that interest rates are slowly coming down. They might drop significantly next year. And the fact that the market is getting firmer. If you're looking, you need to start looking now. I can tell you, otherwise you're going to be paying more than you want to for a home. So this is sort of the market index. So this is a summary and key takeaways for this presentation. If you hear of MV Realty, leave immediately. We talked about the mortgage rate update. I think mortgage rates could level off or start falling early to spring to early summer next year. There's no danger in the pre-foreclosure numbers. There's no crash happening, and I don't see any sign of a crash happening. We talked about contract ratio and what always happens in January. So expect more competition for homes in January. We looked at the Phoenix Metro heat map. It showed the outlying areas cooling more rapidly than in-town areas. And supply and demand numbers that show a balanced market. Now, there'll always be towns and zip codes that are different, If you want to find out what's going on in your particular area, just give me a shout, give me an email, or something like that. Here are some more resources for your enjoyment. You can always contact me or get more information at this website. You can subscribe to this YouTube channel out here, or just click the link in the video that you're watching now. And if you want a regular newsletter, just contact me here. And as always, you have a great week. I hope this is useful, and we'll talk to you next weekend. Thanks. Bye-bye.